Is it legal for restaurants to include a mandatory tip? Let's talk about it on Kyle Talks Money. Tips and service charges aren't the same. Sometimes it's a challenge to figure out how much to tip after a nice meal. Restaurants occasionally include helpful info at the bottom of the check where they calculate a 15, 20, and sometimes 25% tip, making it that much easier to leave some money for your server. If you take a closer look at your bill, you might also see a fee, but don't mistake that for a mandatory tip. First, there's no law requiring customers to leave a tip. If something is mandatory, it's technically not really a tip. The IRS defines a tip as something optional or extra that only the customer determines. But restaurants can include a service charge. Some people mistakenly assume automatic service charges are tips, but this is revenue or property for the restaurant, not necessarily the employees. So it's technically not a mandatory tip. And yes, it's legal for restaurants to include this fee. Sure, it's legal, but in fact, restaurants have been using them for large parties for years. Servers don't always see the money from service fees or charges because restaurants aren't required to pass that money onto their staff. Think of it more as a cover charge than a tip for your waiter. Some restaurants do choose to give servers some of this money and apply the portion they give against their minimum wage obligations. Anything left over goes to the restaurant. This strategy is one of the reasons why service charges are gaining popularity. So although this fee adds to the bottom line cost of your meals, it's not necessarily direct money in the pockets of your servers, and it's one of the things your server wishes they could tell you. But there are different rules depending on where the restaurant is located. Service charges might be legal, but both the IRS and the Department of Labor regulate them. As a general matter, it's important to understand that laws and regulations concerning restaurants operate on the level of the state and local governments. Therefore, depending on the location of the restaurant, different laws will dictate what is necessary and acceptable. There are various laws about tip credit per state and other rules regarding tips that are more complicated. If you're out of the country, you need to know these tipping etiquette rules from around the world. But if a restaurant charges automatic tips, it must be made clear. Restaurants must let customers know in advance of the surcharge for automatic gratuity or tips for large parties. It is entirely acceptable and indeed common for a restaurant to add an additional 20% gratuity charge on a bill with 8 or more guests. But such a fee is only permissible if the policy is made abundantly clear to the customers before the order is placed. That's why you'll often see in small print parties of 8 or more will incur a 20% gratuity fee. It's essential to remember that restaurants, like nearly all businesses, have the right to set the rules of engagement with customers. So if a restaurant wants to charge an automatic gratuity, it's perfectly within right to do so. However, the restaurant does not have the right to deceive its customers, so any agreement must be fully transparent and readily understandable. Although some restaurants do have secret menus they won't tell you about. So what are your thoughts? Do you like automatic tips? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, take care of your money.